it has and always will be my best friend. And so if you ask me that age-old question, would you take a magic pill to cure your stutter? I wouldn't just say no, I'd say, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to everybody here. This day has been another emotional day for me. I miss conferences like this and people opening up about our experiences. There's no other community that is so open and supportive as the stuttering community. So thank you for that. So when Tom asked me to do this, to give a little talk, my first thought was, I'm too young. Ask somebody else, ask someone who's older. So I'm 22 and I just graduated college. And what he was telling me was, right, everyone has a stuttering journey. So I was thinking, if I tell you a little bit about mine and where I am, knowing full well that I have a long way to go, then maybe you'll be able to take something from that and find that useful, and that'll be worth it. So yeah, I'm just here to talk a little bit about myself. So I think one thing I've realized with my stuttering, being a person who stutters, is that if I had to narrow it down to one sentence that has symbolized my growth, is that my stuttering has gone from this enemy, this thorn in my side, to become my best friend. And when I say that, I'm sure there are people saying like, what? Like, Nathan, stop it, right? Like, a stutter can't be your best friend. The best friend is someone who supports you, who's always by your side, who makes you better, whatever it is, it's someone you need. And you might ask, well, why do you feel that way about your stutter? So let me take you back through my own journey and 4 lessons that my stutter has taught me and that really turned it into my best friend. So I'm gonna share my screen. I promise it's not many slides, it's just pictures. Adjust for some imagery. Can you guys see that? Okay. So my story has to start with my dad. My dad, he grew up in India with a stutter. And so he was an immigrant in the 80s. And for him, stuttering was all about the ethos of hard work. So he grew up in a tin roof shack in a rural village in India. He was raising buffaloes, herding cows, all that jazz. And he wasn't rich financially, but he was rich inside. And he always had this dream to come to America, which was a magical place in his eyes and a place where someone is judged, as MLK said so famously, by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. And he would tell me stories about how in the mid-'80s he would be working at a Taco Bell near Louisiana State University, where he went to school, and people would come in and mouth these racial slurs at him and push him around and berate him because of his stutter. And he couldn't fight back. One, because he didn't know the language, and 2, because he was a person who stuttered, who really didn't have this ability to express himself fluently at that time. It wasn't something he necessarily accepted. So I would always ask him, why didn't you say anything? And he never complained. And what he said was, that's the price he paid to be in this amazing country of ours. And he said the lesson he learned was to get up, to learn, to put your head down, and to persevere. And so that ethos of persevering was one of my earliest lessons as a child. And he talked about that in the context of my stuttering, where when you face those difficult situations. You just put your head down, learn, and persevere. So that was lesson one. Fast forward about 10 years, that's me right there. I grew up in San Jose, California, so on the West Coast. This was me in elementary school. So I started stuttering around first grade or second grade. And my stutter really drove me to avoid relationships early on in my life in this critical growth period. And, I'll be honest, I always say that I remember having to cry myself to sleep at night because I just couldn't do something that came so easily to everybody else. And these issues compounded over life. I avoided academic development, avoided vocational development, and I had to walk through the hallways of life all alone. And because I was far less engaging, far less contributing to society in general. And that was tough. I remember a specific instance when I was in middle school. I was in Mrs. McNair's 8th grade classroom. And Mrs. McNair was notorious for being a tough professor of literature. And I would listen to her speak. And for people who stutter, what is the most dreadful thing that a teacher can say, right? It's not that we have an exam, it's class, we have a class presentation coming up next week. And I remember this one book report from her class, just like it was yesterday. I don't know if you all have read Fahrenheit 451. So I had to read that and give a 5-minute presentation about it, which was like hell to me. I was so scared. I practiced for hours with my mom the day before. And when the actual presentation day came, and I was listening to the kids who were in front of me present, I started to, my palms started to feel sweaty. I felt a tremor in my legs. I felt some pressure in my throat. All these symptoms of anxiety because I was so scared of public speaking at that time. And so when it was my turn, I got up to speak, and I started to say, "Hi, my name is," and that went on for about 5 minutes. I couldn't say my name, right? Which to us, it makes sense, right? He's stuttering. To other people, it's like, why can't he say his name? And so after about 5 minutes of me not being able to say my name, my teacher asked me to quietly sit down, and I got a 0 on that assignment. And that was probably one of the most humiliating moments of my life. I could feel these 30 pairs of eyes, other kids staring at me as I went to sit down in shame. And what got me through that was thinking about my dad and thinking about all the hard times he went through to give me a better life than he had. And it kind of crossed my mind that by me giving up, I wasn't doing him any good. I wasn't doing him service, right? Every time I gave up, every time I doubted myself, I was wasting the effort he had put investing in me. So the lesson I learned there was to think about the people I love and the people who have invested in me. And it's those people that drive me every day. So I'm going to do a little activity with all of us. It's a mantra that I do every day. So if everyone can put their hand on their heart, whether you're on camera or not, and close your eyes and think about the people who have given you unconditional love. The people who support you in the good and the bad, the ups and the downs, who love you to the end of the earth and back. that feeling that you get, and you can open your eyes now, that is the power of love and the power of remembering the people who love you. And that got me through this difficult situation and any difficult situation that I face today. And that was my second lesson that stuttering really taught me. So the next picture I'm a little bit embarrassed about. We all have embarrassing high school pictures. So everybody, there's a caveat there. I was 13 with the braces, and I'm opening myself up here, right? This is my embarrassing picture. So I went to high school in the same area in the Bay Area, California. And I was a quiet kid exiting middle school. I had learned some life lessons, but I really didn't have a lot of friends. And my brother in 9th grade, so it was August of 2012, he persuaded me to run for office. And there were class office elections. At first I said, hell no, I'm not doing that. I have trouble speaking up in class, let alone asking people to vote for me. And he kind of, persuaded me, more or less, forced me to do it. As a younger sibling, I couldn't really say anything about it. So for 4 days, I went through what seemed like hell, where I would be walking across the rally court, which is this 50-yard by 50-yard square in the middle of our high school, where all the 2,000 students hung out in between classes. And I would walk up to people with those same anxieties, the sweat on my palms, tremor in my legs, the pressure in my throat. And I would ask them, hey, my name is Nathan. Here's what I'll do for the school. Just a lot, or with a lot of stuttering. After 4 days of that and putting myself out there like I had never done before, I lost. And it was expected, but it was still heart-wrenching, right? I remember standing outside on the sidewalk, thinking, right, is this how it's always going to be? Am I going to have to find a career where I don't have to speak? So there was another part of me, a stronger part, that again remembered my loved ones and wanted to persevere and thought, okay, if you give me a year until next year's elections, I may not be the best at public speaking, but my stutter has allowed me to connect with people who go through invisible journeys every day. I have faced something that people are not always readily aware of, and I understand that, and I can utilize it as a bridge to connect with others. So every day I would try to make a new friend, and I would try to meet new people slowly and slowly for 365 days. And after that, in my sophomore year, I ran again, exact same process. And I actually won, right? Which is, I know it's all great to hear that I won, but the part I want to highlight is not the actual victory. It was the magic existed in the process, and the magic existed on focusing on every day and seeing how can I use my strengths to improve and to not only face up against a challenge, but overcome it. And that reminds me of a quote by Winston Churchill that is probably my favorite quote of all time, which is, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. It's not about winning, it's not about losing, it's not about the outcome. It's about every day living in the moment, trying to be a better person, trying to impact others and connect with others. And that ability to love the process is something that I learned in high school, again, because of my stutter. So that's lesson 3. Lastly, I entered college and I joined these amazing stuttering associations. I started my own nonprofit organization, Stuttering Scholarship Alliance, obviously this group, the World Stuttering Network. I'm blessed to be a regional chapter coordinator of the NSA. And that was the first time I met other people who stuttered, amazing mentors and friends. And I went through the ups and downs of being a leader and in a leadership position with people who I connected with and with people who I loved. But what's interesting is that it was in these stuttering communities where I learned that what gets you, what really matters is the people's whose lives you're able to impact. There's one lady, her name is Zarin, and she's a 26-year-old asylum seeker from Bangladesh who my nonprofit had the opportunity to help. And she faced rape threats and death threats because of her interests in gender equality. And she came here to the US to pursue her dream. And playing a part in her pursuing her dream, that meant the world to me. And so it was from these service activities that I learned that when you put people at the center of what you do, you can unleash power that you never knew you had. And I live every day with that lesson at my heart. And again, that lesson, it came from my stutter. So just as a wrap up, those were the 4 lessons that came from my stutter. Ironically, something that was my enemy for so long. And here I am now. I'm blessed to be entering medical school at Harvard in August and pursuing my dream of becoming a physician. And by no means have I completed any journey, but I think that because my stutter has been able to give me these strong and powerful lessons at such a young age, it has and always will be my best friend. And so if you ask me that age-old question, would you take a magic pill to cure your stutter? I wouldn't just say no, I'd say hell no, right? I love my stutter and nothing will change that. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? When you were coming up as a child and teen and giving yourself these amazingly empowering self-talks and reframing your experiences, were you in conversation with your brother and your parents, or was this really an exclusively internal process for you?
For me, it's probably very different for other people. It was internal because there was a cultural barrier. My parents immigrated from India, so they don't quite understand the mental health struggles that people can have. And that's what a lot of this was. I was an anxious kid. I was probably borderline depressed. And I had to deal with that internally. And my brother, I didn't want to discuss it with him because he was like the version of myself that I wanted to be. Confident, good looking, all of the above. So I wanted to handle it, or I felt bad, asking him for help. So it was internal for those reasons.
Well, I'm glad you found the stuttering community to get the retroactive support that you didn't have in the dark times, but now you're paying it forward for people, because support is always helpful. It's amazing you did all this stuff on your own, but it's great you still feel compelled to give back.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Nathan, this was great. Thanks so much for sharing your story. That was really great.
Yeah, of course. Happy to.
So I've got a question for you, Nathan.
Yeah.
How did you find the stuttering community?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that already? I mean,
No.
You actually found the stuttering support community and the impact that it had on you meeting other people with stutter. It's a fascinating story.
Yeah. So I told everyone that I joined the stuttering community, but I didn't tell them how exactly I did. it was really funny. I was a freshman in college, and I was searching up like stuttering. I was doing a lot of this retroactive analysis, like trying to see and learn about stuttering after I had already been through this early journey. And literally by Googling stuttering, I found out about the NSA. I met people like Tom and the amazing people at the NSA, and slowly I grew and grew. I went to a conference. I started a chapter out in West LA where I was in school, and then I went from there. So it was literally a Google search.
Good deal. So, did you talk about your future directions and the challenges becoming a doctor who stutters?
I didn't.
Some of those
actually
obstacles. I think that's also a great thing to be shared, because that'll lead into our next talk, about work-related issues.
Yeah, I mean, I can just briefly comment on the fact that growing up, I didn't think I could pursue my dream of becoming a doctor because I stuttered. And even now, I'm still a little bit worried about the fact that there's a lot of complicated terminology in medical school, and I'm definitely going to be stuttering on that, and about how other people will see me. But that's a journey that I'm still on, and I'm excited for this upcoming year.
Your patients are going to be lucky to have you, Nathan.
Almost as lucky as your kids are to have you as an SLP, Ben.
Do we have any other questions for Nathan at this time? Anything anyone else would like to ask?
Nathan, I'm curious about, like, you mentioned like your father stutters, and you mentioned the societal differences created a barrier for you and him to connect on stuttering that much. So I'm curious to hear if that's evolved.
Yeah, to be honest, it's gotten better. Obviously, he can't help it because I'm doing all this work in the stuttering community, so it's out there. It's almost against his very willpower. But I will say that continues to be a challenge. It's still, when I am stuttering, because I have good days and bad days, I'm not as severe as I used to be. But when I am stuttering, he does like tell me to stop stuttering or to go fix it a little bit. And, I have to educate him, and I continue to. But, one thing I want to say is I don't blame him at all, because especially he grew up in 1960s rural India. So there was very, very little awareness about any disability, let alone stuttering. So it's a constant process.
Well, and him telling you to stop is obviously objectively not helpful, but I mean, there's that parent guilt too. If he's the parent who stutters, it comes out in all different ways. He's just really overt about it. Like, don't reflect back on me what I passed on to you.
Exactly. I think he just feels bad because he thinks he passed on like something hurtful. And I tell him that it was actually a blessing. I wouldn't be able to have all these amazing connections with people across the world if I didn't stutter. And that's how I look at it. And I have to share that with him, I think, more.
Nathan, thank you for presenting today. May we have a round of applause for this incredible young man. Thank you so much, Nathan.